Welcome, my people, to another panel discussion. Before I continue, just want to, on behalf of the panel, give a massive shout out and thanks to Footpatrol and Puma for putting this on. You all know why you're here. We're here to talk about the cell, have a conversation about the cell. But just before I continue, for those of you that know me, I don't need to introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Pedro. So I'm the guy that's going to be running the show this evening.
Vote for Pedro.
So yeah, mind yourself. Anyway, we have our panelists, Dwayne, Emil, Sunil, and Dave, who is head of footwear and merchandise, or footwear merchandise from Puma. So he'll be answering some of the questions in the first half of this discussion. For those of you that have been to a discussion before, we know how we do. Literally just chime in. If you want to ask a question or make a remark, just fling your arms up, and obviously when I catch you, you say what you've got to say. In regards to rules of engagement, for the benefit of videos and cameras and whatnot, no swearing, no innuendos. Keep it squeaky clean, please. I'm sorry. Beyond that, because we're here and we're generally discussing Puma Cell, other brands, generally speaking, are off limit just for the purpose of this discussion this evening. Beyond that, if you have something to say, obviously put your hands up. Please respect each and every people's comments. Whether you agree with it or not, respect the comments for what they are. And I guess that's pretty much it for house rules. So without further ado, we're going to kick off and concentrate on the narrative in regards to the Puma Cell. So I want to talk about childhood and the memories of Puma Cell.
Kicked off from. Let's bring it to the crowd. Does anybody have any memories or remember the OG Puma Cell going forward? Right at the back. But on a real, I do secondary school. Bless you. Secondary school, 98. 98 was it? Yeah,
98.
Yeah. I was shocked myself knowing that.
I know you're well old.
Yeah, exactly.
I was at college then.
I was secondary school, but yeah. 98, secondary school, PE teachers, Puma Cell was the go-to shoe.
Pretty much.
Very distinct in terms of its colour. Very robust. Runner wasn't. Would you say there was any lifestyle section back then?
Not at the time.
Lifestyle wasn't actually a used term when we were at secondary school.
Yeah.
We made lifestyle. I don't know how you guys feel, but when we picked shoes, we picked them because they looked good and we wanted to look good wearing them in the school, in the playground. Yeah, you wanted to be the guy who was standing out wearing something individual. So, I mean, for me personally, Puma Cell, the thing that stood out was the green. That's the memory for me. I don't know if any of you guys, I think I saw you put your hand up. So you remember Cell, right?
Is that neon green?
Yeah.
Luminescent blue and green.
But what did it mean to you? If you went and bought Puma Cell, was it because of the looks or the fact that it was performing?
I don't know. When I remember back to the time, I remember there was like every brand had their own kind of technology, so to speak, and I just knew that the Puma Cell was the Puma's one. I never really owned a pair. Couldn't say any of my friends did either. I remember the trainer.
So you remember it because it was like technology, I suppose, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I remember back in primary. I think I was in primary school when they dropped. Primary or secondary, I can't remember. But back then, you remember when you wouldn't wear a shoe for it's his fatigue. You wore a shoe because these shoes make me run faster. Remember that? But I'm not sure if I can say my memories of Puma Cell because, well, I never owned a pair, but when my memories are when I used to look at the Littlewoods catalogues.
Taking
You
it
know,
away.
You know, being young, there's one reason why we looked at the Littlewoods catalogues. It was Freeman's, yeah. So there was that, and then if you were into that type of thing, you look at the trainers and then the toys as well. Yeah.
It's okay.
I think from what I can remember, it was Christian or what's his name?
Linford Christie.
Lunchbox.
Yes.
That's why I come from, remembering the
Said no innuendo.
Sorry.
Strike him off.
So you remember the fact that it was a running shoe
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
like, Dave could explain.
Oh, don't get that side. We'll leave. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I remember.
So it obviously was a running shoe. I think Dave could explain what cell technology actually was designed for.
Someone absolutely nailed it. It's like mid-90s, late 90s, every brand was coming with new technologies. There was a move away from like your traditional EVA stuff. So everyone was coming with, new translucent PUs. It's all about visible technology as well. So being able to see it kind of added value, like you say, made you think you run faster in these. You know, you can see why it would make you run quicker. So yeah, Cell was Puma's point of view. It was an evolution of Trinomic, which everyone knows. So yeah, and it was again hexagons and all that was all about the structure and supporting the shoe. So yeah.
Why was it a hexagon?
It's one of nature's strongest actual shapes. So there was actually some, thought process around exactly the technology there as well.
Was it actually proven that wearing a pair of Puma Cells you can actually run faster?
That's a stitch up. No, let's get outside.
Get yourself out.
We'll get you in a meter race. You tell me.
No, 'cause it's funny you mentioned running faster because my memories of Puma Cell was the TV ad where you got the guy in the one fit white bodysuit who in like a science lab with a petri dish and injection, and you got the cell being created and then being put into the shoe, and then all of a sudden he can motor around a running track at the speed of light.
That's actually Linford Christie as well.
Really?
Yeah.
There we go.
What's your man?
Wake up. There's a coffee at the bar.
Oh, thank you.
So with the Puma Cell, we have what was known as the flagship model, the Pinnacle, the Endura, and then you also have as well the Cell Venom.
Yeah.
And I imagine for Puma back in those days, they were heavy hitters of a shoe in terms of cells and whatnot.
Yeah.
Question: Why? What happened? Why did they disappear?
Well, I think early 2000s there was sort of like a shift into a different, more sort of menswear fashion trend. So you saw more low profile product. So whilst like mid 90s it was all about visible technology, it was all about moving away from EVA into these big PU, translucent PUs. Then it came more about low profile. Mostro, for example, was one that Puma really pioneered. Obviously, everyone remembers Speedcat and things like that as well. There was a big brown shoe trend as well, so you saw a lot of lifestyle brands coming through. And for a good 5-10 years, that was really dominant in the marketplace. Everybody had a low-profile shoe at one point. So,
Wouldn't you have thought it would have been a good idea to use Usain Bolt for bringing it back in as his peak at the time?
Yeah, it would have been a great idea. I think where we've got to now in terms of trends, like obviously Usain Bolt's sort of retired, he's took a bit of a back seat. I think this is more really today now rooted in the idea of sportswear being adopted by high fashion, isn't it? So it doesn't necessarily correlate in quite the same way, but yeah, definitely, it would have made sense.
So is that what brought the Puma Cell back?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. So again, we're in a sort of trend cycle at the moment where high fashion is massively influenced by sports style. You see it from the catwalks to the street, don't you? So that's when brands that have that credible history sort of look into their archives and start seeing what was our point of view back then. How can we be authentic in the marketplace now? So that's when you start looking at, okay, what can we make a real statement with? And that's what these are. They're a real statement. You know, you look, you remember it. It's iconic. You remember the translucent, the bright green and yellow. That's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make a statement.
Sorry.
In terms of success of when it was released back then,
Yep.
and then kind of what you're projecting now, do you almost feel like, in some ways, it was a little bit before its time? Like it almost would have been better suited if it had now been kind of dropped as its first release as opposed to a retro of it.
I think what sets it apart is authenticity. You know, there's a lot of brands out there. It's a very busy marketplace. What sets us apart is that it's credible. It comes from our history, so we can talk about it in a very unique way. So it's about. I think it lends itself actually now to say, look, we've looked into our archives. We were doing it back then. We're bringing it back, but we're also going to look at reinventing it, bringing it to market in new ways to sort of. Essentially, we're telling the story of then, and watch as the years come on, we'll see like modern iterations of it. So you know, it's the then and the now sort of thing. So yeah, no, I think to answer your question, it makes sense to tell the story, and it's good to have the history because it makes us credible and it sets us apart from what's in the marketplace.
I can't really remember the name of the model, but I remember seeing them in JJB where it was like a Puma Cell at the back, and it didn't really have a midsole at the front. The upper kind of came down to the outsole.
Right. Yes.
That's kind of the first time I've seen where you haven't got a visible midsole.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a technology. It was actually probably called the Jago or something like that. There's a few versions from the early 2000s where Cell took on slightly new sort of looks, and the idea was exactly this whole idea of trying to move away from low, sort of chunkier soles and into low profiles, and move away from EVA as well. So that's actually overlasted. So that's where the shoe comes right over the midsole. So the midsole's still there. It's just not visible from the side. So.
Is there no way where that cell technology could work with a lower profile type shoe? I mean, because from, again, my memories, all Puma products that had the cell incorporated, they're all slightly oversized or chunky shoes. Would the cell not work with a lower profile shoe?
Yeah, absolutely, and it actually did. It evolved further into the 2000s as the low profile came in, and it took sort of. I mean, cell got used in many different sort of areas of sport, from like football as well. There was the Accelerator football boot, and cross training shoes as well. So the Inhale as well, and it did exactly that. It started to move into different versions and evolve. So yeah, like any technology, you push it forward, you evolve it as well. And like I said, you'll see that story be told from its like birth right through to the different versions of it as we sort of begin to establish it again in the market.
So do you have a reason as to why Cell disappeared when it actually did? So as you said, like early 2000s,
Yeah.
Why we never sort of really saw it again?
I would say that there was so many other areas that we stood for as a brand, lots of things that we focus on, and if you have too much product out there, maybe you lose a little bit of focus. Okay. And I would say with the evolution of low profile, and Puma was very dominant in that area with the evolution of things like Mostro and Speedcat, it made sense to focus on your strengths. So, and then in this market now, this is definitely a strength of ours, so it makes sense to come back.
So it seems like of recent times we've seen like a resurgence of like chunky shoes. The Puma Cells come back. If the chunky shoes phase dies away, will the Puma Cell die away again?
No, I think, like I said, early 2000s as well, it evolved into lower profile silhouettes and took on new forms. Definitely now Cell is established, or we're looking to establish it as a technology, and it's something that we can continue to evolve, and we have a whole catalogue of OGs that we can just call on to make sure that we're relevant in its different versions. So I think it will evolve as the market evolves.
Was the Blaze of Glory still a Cell shoe in the end then as well? Or?
I believe that was a trinomic shoe. So again, there were very subtle ways at which we used the technology. Trinomic was linked to Cell, but Trinomic was really more of you could see it only on the outsole, and it was more used for zoning impact for running, whereas Cell was, the whole idea was to be visible from a side profile. So.
Obviously, the people in this room will remember the shoe with nostalgia. But how do you plan on kind of taking it now and marketing it to the people that are you know, like the younger generation coming up that are buying shoes that, you know, necessarily wouldn't have that attachment to the shoe, as the guys mentioned, from like secondary school?
Alex, appreciate the question. Could you park that, because we're going to tackle that later on, but appreciate the question. But just to touch on the Cell and the, I can never say that word, Trinomic?
Trinomic, yeah.
What are the differences? Just if you could explain to
I mean,
audience.
primarily Trinomic was a smaller and different structure, and it was again used as pods to target different areas of impact. So very often you'd see Trinomic on the outsole, just in the heel, and that's pretty much as you're running, you impact on the ground. So it made a very different sort of look. And I think back then as well, there was definitely a trend of being able to turn your shoe over and seeing that window of visible technology. But at the point of purchase, or when you're in a store, you don't see that. A lot of people don't think to pick up the shoe and look, oh look, there's what I'm buying.
It was still that hexagon shape though, wasn't it?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. But I think, like I said, now and back then, the idea of being able to look at a shoe on a shelf and see, and then even just wearing it down the street, you can see where the value is. And like I said, making a statement, being able to show off what you got.
So between the two technologies, if I can call them that, am I right in thinking that the Cell is a better performer than the Trinomic?
I think it was different. It had a different purpose. So the idea of Cell was that these are long distance runners originally. So the idea that you could go and do a half marathon or a marathon in them, and that they support your foot, they're comfortable over long distances. I would say Trinomic was, it came before Cell, and it was probably similar job, but it actually probably didn't perform as well. So yeah, an evolution of that. So yeah, they're similar technologies, but again, just progressing them and finessing them in different ways.
I see.
What was the point of the technology? Was it an impact base to be able to spread the impact and get that energy back in it, or was it just an absorption to be able to make it?
I would say it was probably a bit of both, to be honest. Absorption, shock impact, the idea that, you know, pounding the concrete for, you know, 3 hours is going to have a really strong impact on your knees, on your legs. So the idea was a lot of it was to take impact. I think the idea of energy return is quite a new concept in footwear and performance. So I think really back then it was more supportive. Yeah.
In regards to, obviously this is, will we call it a retro?
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there any differences in the build of the shoe now compared to how it was built previously?
Yeah, I mean, for anybody who's seen an original Cell or Venom or Endura, they actually look quite chunky in the forefront, and that's because back then it was just a slightly wider last, which is the virtual mould, the idea of a virtual foot that goes in, that takes the shape of the shoe, so that when you put your foot in it, it's comfortable. Back then there was just a different shape. I mean, like anything, there's trends. So back then a slightly wider foot was, again, I guess, on trend, or seemed more comfortable. Whereas now it's the idea of taking like a more sort of fashion or lifestyle approach with the last. So it's, again, more of a sleeker look on the foot. So in terms of how it looks versus the original, it's definitely more sleeker, and it's more fitted to the foot. So from a bit of a more of a modern look.
But the Cell technology is identical, is it?
Exactly right. So the tooling, the outsole is identical, but the upper, again, is slightly more finessed.
Cool. So we're looking after the people with the fat feet and just making
See where you're at. Size up.
Yes, Jonathan.
So are you guys going to look to maintain the performance element, or is it like strictly lifestyle going forward?
I think this is a lifestyle play predominantly. So, I mean, like I said, even just touching on energy return and the modern concepts of performance and running and how far they've evolved, and the demands that an athlete looks for now, they've massively outgrown what this was originally catering for. So I would say for the time being, this is definitely looking for more of a lifestyle play. But I think going forwards, they're going to look at different material compounds that give you more energy return, or more impact, and more tailored for like modern performance. So again, at the moment, it's about telling the original story.
So bringing the Cell into a sharper focus, how does that product sit alongside some of the Puma products of today? So your RS series, your RSXs. I mean.
So RSX was all about the reinvention of the RS, which is running system, and it's a type of compound which is, again, performance based, but again not a visible technology. a different point of view. I would say it looks more like a fashion sneaker or a luxury sneaker. This one is again really playing more on that sports style heritage, that more sportswear in high fashion, and the idea again of visible technology versus something that's a bit more considered. Like this one.
I was actually considering that the technology is quite sort of high end as it was in the 90s. How have you managed to keep the price point so like low, if anything?
I mean, there's a marketplace out there and there's a demand, so you've got to cater for that and you do what you can. The goal is always to hit a commercial price point, make it available to people that want to wear it. You don't want to alienate them, but you also want to make sure you keep the luxury and the premium quality, the hand feel and the materials there as well. So there's a bit of a balancing act as well. So there's a few other things and tweaks and tricks that factories can do, but the goal ultimately is to make it accessible. Yeah.
So who would you say the target audience is for the Puma Cell?
I mean, it's great in that it's an OG, so you can tell that those that remember it will resonate with it and they'll go and buy it. But the way that the market is and the trends are at the moment, it definitely appeals to a younger generation in a totally different way. So it's able to tell two different stories. I would say it actually touches on high, again, depending on materials and what have you, you can really hit a high fashion audience or a streetwear audience. It really, or you could go back to just go for sport looks or some OG colorways, and you can play on all different looks to hit different consumers.
In terms of that, have you thought about any collabs? Because the climate these days is about hype.
Yeah, definitely.
Being current out there, who's
we've got all sorts of sort of collabs coming through that we're targeting. So we're again looking at high fashion collaborations such as Rude, a guy called Ruigi coming out of LA. He's doing a really nice collaboration on the Endura. But then you've got the likes of Blends and a few others, even as far as using sports brands such as Ferrari as well, and seeing different applications and looks that you can...
Bringing some of the heritage in that sense, yeah.
Exactly right, yeah. So again, we've got a history in motorsports as well, so it makes sense to dial up those pieces as well.
Cool. What are your I know the word chunky has been bandied about over the last few minutes. What are your thoughts that someone would actually refer to that shoe as a chunky shoe?
I mean, that's fine because that's what it is at the moment, if that's what we call it, a chunky shoe trend. My personal point of view on that is that we're really more in looking at 90s revivals or OG revivals. They're slightly chunkier and that's what people are deviating towards at the moment, but really we're bringing back original shoes. So that's what 90s running was. It was slightly chunkier, it was slightly bigger looking shoes, so they've been adopted and it's influenced a new trend, and that's great. I mean, it's evolved in different ways as well. You see extreme dimensions now on shoes, so it's not so much chunky as it is really taking the dimensions to their extremes. So
would you say the fact that the Puma Cell's now coming in this climate, would you say that was more by coincidence, or is it actually a design in terms of getting it out whilst chunky shoes are?
I think it's a perfect storm. When heritage brands that have been around for a long time see these trends, and there's a lot of trend analysis, a lot of reading the market that goes on, they know they have a portfolio to call on, and generally speaking, if you've been around for 30, 40, 50 years, you've got enough of a back catalogue to be able to recognise, to a certain extent even lead trends and take them in new directions. It may be adopted early, but then you can see it taken in different directions by other brands, sort of versions of those.
Cool. Final question, gentleman at the back.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just touch on that as well, Dave. That's what's interesting about Puma is I think a lot of people, you can almost look back on the categories or the re-retros that so many other brands are doing, but no, Puma's archive is ridiculous, and I think a lot of people don't actually know the stuff that what we have in our catalogue that we've got to offer, and the Cell series is going to be a continuation that we're going to see way into 2020, if not further. So there'll be so much more bits coming forward that we're going to play with. So I just think watch this space on that.
I'm going to put Rory on the spot and ask the stellar question that he posed to me earlier.
So I was just saying that with all the nostalgia that's happening at the moment, do you find brands are being not lazy as such, but maybe cashing in on the older demographic who have the money now, who can afford things, and are nostalgic for their older models that they grew up with, which they might not have been able to afford when they were younger? Is it laziness? Is it not coming up with new technology, or is it just cashing in on people who may have more money now to actually afford the reissues?
Do you wanna?
I think it's a combination of all of that, truth be told. Myself as a collector, I thrive on nostalgia. It's got referring back to what was before, maybe what I couldn't afford or what I used to know back in the day is what kind of influences a lot of my purchases. Sorry, was my...
Yeah, man, I thought you were going to slap me.
No. I'm not violent. But yeah, I think it's a combination of all of those, but nostalgia does go a very, 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 very
Look at
long
every
way.
single brand at the moment, they're re-releasing OGs, retros. It's it's great to see, but sometimes it's a bit like, I'd like to see a bit more new tech and actually see what can be done now we have the technology to bring out
No,
versions of it almost.
I think there could be a sort of crossover, isn't it? Because you it's now concentrated on the 90s, right? There's a lot of 90s stuff coming out as I'm seeing it. And people, like maybe a few years ago, go, why don't they bring out some of that 90s stuff? So they're bringing out the 90s stuff, and then it also brings that question. I don't think you can please everyone all the time. For me personally, I mean, I'm banging to my vintage. I like the old stuff, always been into the old stuff. Those who know me know that I like collecting originals of just about everything I can get my hands on. So yeah, for me, I haven't got a problem with it. I don't know if anyone else feels differently about it. Do they feel that it's a lazy thing by the brands, or do you think it's what people are, or the brands answering what we wanted?
I guess you've got then the ramifications of people going, because they are used to the original ones, are they satisfied with what's coming out? Because obviously a lot of the retros aren't to the point of what they should be. You look at some of the retros of some other companies and they're not quite, the shape's not right, everything's a little bit off, which you would have thought in this day and age it's not a hard thing to do to recreate something which has been done already.
So does anyone else have an opinion on that as to why they think that brands can't get retros almost like one-to-one, considering they made them in the first place? I mean,
They broke the mold.
Whoa. Heartstrings. You're tugging.
Okay.
It's like, I think you discussed it a couple of weeks ago on your on when you were discussing it before. It's the paint jobs and I can't remember what I said now. The costs, and some of the stuff that they used before might be on the ban list now, so they can't use the same material or the same products as they used before. So I think that's why some of the brands now, there has to be a slight difference to what they had originally to what they have now. So I heard that might be a difference. That might be the reason why we're not getting that same quality or paint jobs, or for example the paint job as well, because they might be on the ban list.
Sure, and that's something, just before we go on to the next person, that's something that Dave mentioned earlier, not necessarily here, in terms of the manufacturing, the production process, making the Endura and the Venom Cell. As you mentioned, it's slightly different. The Endura was part of the manufacturing process, it was hand stitched, whereas this time around it was digitally stitched. So already you can see there's, gosh, I'm fighting. I need chopsticks. So already there's elements of the manufacturing process which is different. I mean, I guess there's nothing wrong with hand stitching uppers and midsoles and whatnot, but I guess there's an easier process or a cheaper process to doing it digitally. So, I mean, there is that argument. I wanted to take someone at the back who put their hands up.
I think it was James.
No, I was just saying they changed the molds, isn't it? That's why the OGs ain't the same as the ones that come out now, because the molds are different.
There is that challenge too.
Franklin?
A lot of the time they actually didn't anticipate that they were going to have to remake them. So a lot of the machines the original machines that made a lot of the products, they kind of moved the technology forward. So the original machine might have a certain technique and way that it made the product or whatever it may be, and they just can't get get back to that, you know. So that's one of the.
So it's like they almost didn't feel that those shoes in particular were going to set a legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
Alex.
Do you think it's also got to do with the fact that 15, 20 years ago, they weren't producing shoes in the same volume that they are now? So before, you know, for example, when the Cell came out before, I can guarantee you that it wasn't, you know, as much as groundbreaking as it was for Puma and whatnot. The number of units they were looking to shift, now looking at the size of footwear within the UK alone, it's, I mean, just touching on like, you know, Emil's Soul Seekers thing, it tells you about how big, shout out Soul Seekers, it tells you how big the UK footwear market is now. Like, brands are having to produce so much product to kind of please people that essentially you're never ever going to get that quality right. That's why there are so many complaints all the time about, you know, paint jobs and cracks and glue stains and things like that, because it's just the level of volume of product they're producing.
But you'd also think with modern technology that it would be easier to make what people wanted, right? So say I spoke to Dave and he said to me, we streamlined the shoe, and you heard what he said compared to the original 1998 and even with the Venom, he said that we made it sort of more sleeker at the front. So I think they've got like that conscious effort. Like he said to me, I wouldn't have known that until he told that to, you know, because I haven't got an original model of it. But so they can, I think it is being attempted, but not on everything. So I think that's a question within itself. You know, why is it not being applied to everything? Yeah, if you can do it with some. Yeah.
Because you would need to know how the OG is to then say, all right, we're going to streamline it. So, yeah, exactly that.
Cool. Right. One, I hate criticizing people or brands or things, but one,
that's a lie.
This guy. I don't know about brands. But I do. As much as I do criticize, I actually hate criticizing. I believe that.
That's not.
Anyway, for what I'm gonna say. In regards to Puma, because this is a Puma conversation, we don't have much information in terms of products, campaigns, nothing. There's no visibility, and I'm only saying this because I guess I've got the platform to say it. But away from the crowd, a lot of people said, I can't find any information on Puma, on the Cell, on the Endura. So I just want to know, how do Puma plan to engage with their consumers, with their fans, so that they can know and be aware of the various products that are out there in the marketplace or that are coming to the marketplace? Tom?
Yeah.
Everyone, Tom!
It's a valid point. I guess the first thing for us engaging is working out who we're trying to engage with, because obviously some people are looking for style information on the relevance of it in today's society, and some people are looking for a story. Like you guys, you want to know about the heritage and you want to know about the past and what's inspired the future. And I guess for us, it's cherry picking the people who have a credible platform like yourself, like the Drop Date and so on, and Soul Seekers to tell these stories to the right people.
Plug.
Plug.
If Tom wants to talk about the world's first ever UK sneaker, there's 75 minutes long in peace.
Thank you, Tash.
Thanks. But that's for us, it is working with the right platforms to tell these stories. I guess obviously we can't go on every platform, we want to make sure we're on the right ones. We've got something like this today which is community-led, getting the people to ask the questions that we need to be knowing the answers about so we can act on these. Tomorrow we're engaging with people which is more about a style-led conversation, getting them hands-on with the product. So really for us it's actually understanding our audience a lot more so we know where we need to place the information for people to consume and therefore hopefully tackle the issue that you're mentioning now.
Speaking of style-led, is there anything we can look forward to in 2019? I know we touched on it when, was it Dave?
Dave.
When Dave was here. Is there anything that we can look forward to?
In terms of from a sell story, most definitely. Some of the partners we're coming through, obviously we spoke about what we're doing with Rude, we've got some stuff coming through with MTM, we've got some stuff coming through with Ferrari. When you go out in the back room, you'll see some of these collaboration partners secretly stashed around in some of the cages, so do have a look. And if you have any questions, come find us. But the partners who bring the style, bring the story, are leading their own journeys. So what we're trying to do is utilise these people and their own stories to bring a new Lisa style, a new Lisa story to the cell with us. So it's not just one Puma, one-dimensional story, but we're actually opening it up to the world of designers, the world of people who are changing the scene, to help these stories further us as a brand as well as the shoe. So that's hopefully the style we've been looking to see.
And this is only the tip of the iceberg as well. Like with the styles that we've brought back, Endura is probably the most aggressive piece that we've had. That's in the archive, that lives in with the cell technology within it. Venom being behind that. I've seen the back catalogues from 94, 95 all the way up to early 2000s and what we've actually got. And the stuff that we can bring back through, and we are bringing back through. Cell Alien's a shoe that we're going to bring back in autumn, winter 19. So that'll be a new silhouette coming through. Inhale's coming through, Ultra's coming through. This guy's got a pair on, so you should check them out.
Easy. Plug.
Man. So I think that's the most important thing. Is Cell is not just, it's not a moment. It's going to be something that we're going to be talking about for a very long time, and that we've now finally delved into the archives with, and we'll be talking about a lot more going forward.
Cool. And sorry,
So I was just going to say, there's a lot of design aspects going around hybrids at the moment from various brands. Is that, hold on a sec, did you say the world's first sneaker documentary in the UK?
Yes, I did.
Oh, just checking. Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. But yeah, no. Is there any way that Puma might go down that line with bringing some of the heritage models and then crossing over with something new?
Yeah, absolutely. So like, I think one thing that Dave didn't touch on was liquid cell. So what we're actually doing is, when we get into 2019, I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to really talk about without ruining them.
Keep going. Get him a drink.
We're going to be talking way more about the future of it as well. So we've got a whole new technology coming through, which lives in our performance range. All our performance running stuff coming through in autumn of 2019 is going to have something called liquid cell in it, which is obviously an updated version from what cell was back in the day. I can't get into the details of it in terms of like the tech of it, because that's not my background.
Give up his chair.
I can't tell you the performance values of it, because I don't run. Look at me. That's it. So and we are crossing that into lifestyle too. So we're gonna have this whole section of running stuff going forward, and then there will be lifestyle versions of that liquid cell technology coming into our, sports style or whatever you want to call it, range that sits within this era as well. So
cool.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody in here actually owns Cell, apart from those that I've seen on your foot. But quick one to the Puma guys. How's the obviously the Venom is releasing tomorrow. Plug.
6th of December.
6th of December. But how was the Endura received by the consumer?
Oh.
You asking me or the people in the room?
More Puma guys.
Well, yeah, you specifically, and then the people in the room if they want to add to it.
Yeah, it was obviously introduced at Hype Fest on a global level first, so it was a really nice introduction platform. I think it was introduced to a certain crowd of people like yourselves, collectors, and people who know about the Cell story really well. I think we did miss a trick in terms of the second wave of people who we're trying to target, and that is the new wave of kids. They don't care about the Pelés and Maradonas no more. They want Ronaldos, they want Messis. So what we've got to do is concentrate on telling the story of the past, but also concentrate on the present. And going back to your point is making sure the information is out there for those who need to know about the original story, but also the information or the content is out there to drive the relevance of it in today as well, in today's style. And that's what we're going to try start to do as well, platforms as we move forward.
And it's more of a celebration of the tech as opposed to how did Cell Endura do. Cell Endura is going to do well and be a part of our story, but Cell's way more important than the silhouette itself. So, the Endura is the intro of it. That's our most aggressive and wild looking shoe from that kind of era. We've got loads of other pieces that come in and around that, like I've sort of mentioned before, that are going to come in. So it's more about the technology as opposed to the fact that we're bringing back Cell as a re-retro, as opposed to Endura, which is obviously the first piece that we've brought back in. Venom, Alien, there's loads of bits and pieces we're going to bring back through. So
is there a space where, I know this is part of it, but is there a marketing campaign that highlights and celebrates Cell that will be taking place at all?
Tom's marking.
Yeah.
I'll take this on the top level, high group.
Hey, Ruth.
Hey, Ruth.
So I think one of the questions in the first half as well that was really really interesting. I wanted to get kind of into it, and it's where Tom was going to go as well. There's a real piece that Dave talked about the fashion style and the fashion trend, and also that how do we get it to the mass audience. And I think fundamentally it's about being great custodians of the shoe and the story, and doing the storytelling. And according to who we're trying to reach, storytelling is more in depth, or a really great opportunity like this to learn and educate about the shoe. And really go back into the back catalogue and talk about the retro heritage and you know, the performance side of things from when to now, and then the opportunity to take it into the next level, which is, you know, making it relevant. And why would you know, an 18 or a 22-year-old want it today? What makes it relevant to them? And those are two different levels of storytelling, and it's our job to try and make it right for each of those different levels. And that's a lot of the activation that Tom was talking about this week. And then to answer the question about the campaign, again, it's a levels thing. You're going to see Puma doing big top tier global activations with, you know, there's going to be a superhero theme around it, because the Cell was about enhancing performance. And that's going to be our platform as we go through this season and into 19, about enhancement. And superheroes is a really great way of telling that story, and they're clearly huge franchises, superheroes coming out right now, being relevant to that more, that younger audience, or that today's audience in terms of that relevancy, which isn't necessarily going to, you know, push the button or float the boat of the sneakerheads or the people, you know, that really want to get into the retro story.
Bring back Linford Christie.
That's what I'm
Jay?
Sorry, hold on. Guys, please.
So Puma, you've touched on like an interesting aspect, which is like perspective of your markets that you're trying to reach out to. I personally work part-time in a retail store selling trainers, and one thing that comes up a lot from customers, which is quite like they're showing that idea of a shoe being unpopular, is that they'll say, oh yeah, but that shoe's a bit too much of a dad shoe. So for the younger generation, I would like to know, like, what differentiates the Puma Cell from being a dad shoe, or is this the idea of a dad shoe something that it's cool for you guys that you want to embrace? Because we are getting dads who are in. I just wanted to hear your sort of ideas on that, and is that something you want to embrace, or?
The franchise is bigger than a dad shoe. That's the answer.
Yeah.
The franchise is way bigger. Like you'll see bits coming through, like, you know, that we've got, like the low profile thing that Dave talked about earlier, like in the 2000s, that had Cell technology in it. So Cell's way bigger than just a dad shoe. So you can see other brands coming in with their dad shoe vibes, and arguably, yes, maybe Endura's on that dad kind of tip, but I don't think a dad's gonna wear that. So it depends how you kind of look at it. I don't think Venom's a dad shoe. So it's just a case of, you know, how you sort of interpret it. But those are, like I say, like the rest of the pieces that we're going to be talking about with Cell for the next 2 to 3 years, you know, arguably aren't dad shoes. They're just a great retro runner.
Speaking of Venom, you said superheroes.
Oh.
What superheroes can we expect?
So there's a bait coming out.
The jacket.
Size 11, please.
But we all know it's to the point around commercialising as well. There are pieces that are needed to be done to drive awareness, to create cut through, and then there's real storytelling that needs to be done to make sure that history and that heritage. Some people's perspective might be a dad shoe, but we've got to do the storytelling right to make sure people know that it's bigger than that. And I think it's hugely important with the performance piece, and that came up earlier as well, is that originally it's a performance shoe. You know, I didn't realise it was kind of middle long distance. I wouldn't want to run for a bus in them these days because of technology, but that's what they were originally for. So from a brand perspective, hugely important that we're doing a big cross-category campaign and cross-gender. it's the one thing you didn't give away is there's a female silhouette coming out next season as well. But it's hugely important because it's not about what gender or what age necessarily. It's how you want to wear it and what your perspective is.
Is the female market important?
Oh, massive. Yeah. But it's about anybody wearing their shoe their way, regardless of gender.
Nathan.
So in response to gender, is there a point in this next foreseeable future, hopefully within the year or two, where this won't be a discussion of whether it's male or female, whether it'll just be unisex?
We'd like to think so, and we'd like to think we're one of the brands that push that in the way.
So will there be a unisex cell trainer?
There'll be,
There already is,
it's about the size run that it does.
Yeah.
It goes
Yeah.
right down to
3.
size 3 and right up to, thank you.
For example, Pam Pam, like great, women's retailers around the corner. Talking about Footpatrol, but they buy pretty much predominantly men's pieces and then just size it down because it is all unisex. Puma's definitely aimed at having that unisex sort of level that we work towards.
So allowing the buyer to be the owner of what shoe they want it to be as well. So we obviously are from a scene where there used to be a male shoe, a female shoe, and it is something that hopefully will be eradicated very soon. But the shoe, the size run is there is a shoe for someone to make it their own and it's do what they wish with it. If it's available in their size, it's their shoe. So it's not a male shoe or a female shoe in our eyes. It's a shoe which is available to all in certain stores.
Ruel first, then Alex.
He was first.
No, go for it.
Going back to memories, my first memory was football boots, the Puma Cell boot range, and we spoke about it a bit earlier upstairs, like shin pads and all that type of stuff. With it, being the trainer, you're gonna obviously doing performance, you're gonna dive into that football range again, or touch on those type of things.
It's a good question. How do you call it design quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something the global design team, obviously we're given information at a certain point within the time frame, so we may hear a lot more in the next 6 months of where it is going. It's definitely an option for the brand because as you said, the technology and obviously the hexagonal allowing kind of mass of the space, it allows us to go into a lot of markets which you already have kind of touched in. So it's definitely a direction we can go, but right now we wouldn't have the information to share that, I'm afraid.
Cool. Alex.
Some more question for you guys, and I suppose the rest of the room as well. Might be beneficial from Puma. How do you, as like season collectors,
calling us old. Check the greys. Check the greys.
Just because I'm a dad. How do you guys feel about Puma's approach to kind of how they're releasing shoes like over the last 12 months? Because as we know, like the footwear calendar is incredibly busy across the year. And if I take it back to kind of like February, March, when RSO system was kind of like relaunched, how do you feel like they have done in terms of releasing their product and telling a story behind it? Because in a day and age where we're flooded with product week in, week out, you don't tend to see a new release from Puma every other week or 2, 3 every week like you do with some other brand. So how do you guys feel about
that? For me, I see it as maybe a different approach. Because I think the oversaturation of the market, which I think all of you would agree with, is very evident. It's quite hard to be seen in that environment unless you are the brand that is putting everything out via social media, every single outlet going. I think if your design stands out, then it will get noticed. For me personally, if I see a shoe and I'll say to one of my friends, I'll say to like Rich, I'll be like, have you seen this? And he'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling that. And then I'll look at it and I'll be like, yeah, that's really good. It doesn't matter who makes it. If it looks good to me, I'll be interested in it. And that's that's my personal point of view.
So do you think their approach has worked?
At this moment in time, I feel the Puma approach is hitting the youth more than it would be, say, myself. And I think it's doing really well. And I went into Puma today just to do a little bit of the R&D and have a look around and see what was going on. There was literally a queue of kids in there wanting the RS series. And they're all like crowding around it and looking at it and they're trying it on and stuff. Not running out the store though like that. That should have been in Soul Seekers, the movie. but for me personally, yeah, I don't know if it's quite hitting the whole range, even though it's a 20-year-old shoe.
Do you know what? I want to I want to disagree. I don't think, in my opinion, Puma have done a good job in the sense of pushing the product out there. It's a case, for me personally, I feel I have to, if I want to find out information about what Puma are doing, I have to look for it, and very, very hard. Which is why I asked the question in terms of what are they going to do to increase visibility and engage with their customers. So in regards to, say for example, their RS series, I had to do my homework. I had to look and find out what is this shoe, why is this shoe in the market, blah blah blah. The Hot Wheels that came out the weekend just gone, it was by chance I came across it, and I thought, why are Puma not shouting about the shoe? The shoe's it's a banging shoe, but yet
it is a banging shoe,
but it's not publicised at all.
I think
just to touch quickly on that, but you say that. Again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Essentially, that there's not enough information about the shoe. But if you take, for example, the RSX, which launched 6-7 weeks ago, it sold out pretty much everywhere straight away. So is it a case of them not having to give you the information on the shoe because the product speaks for itself, or is it a case of that maybe it's a certain colorway or something that just bangs and sells out straight away?
Good design will always shine through.
Oh, you're rhyming.
Bars. But no, for real. Album coming out next month. No, it's a very aggressive market, and a lot of people know my background and my collection. For the RS to stick out, it must mean that it's a great piece of design, regardless if it does have the promotion we're used to, because that's another thing. It's got promotion, it's just not what you've been looking out for, what I've been looking out for.
Is it down to who you follow as well? Who are you following? Do you know what I mean? What
influencers, yeah, exactly that.
Would you rather have great product and not so much like marketing and it kind of shoved in your face, or a campaign that's just massively thrown in your face and then the product's kind of although it looks nice, it's kind of subpar?
That is true. How it's done now works because it is a great piece of design. It's not buy this, but I would still buy into it because it is just a nice shoe. And sometimes you don't want a shoe that everyone has got or clicked onto, because the moment that happens, it's not as desirable a shoe. We've seen where it works on one hand, but then it crashes and burns on the other.
I'm just before we chuck it to Samuel real quick, I just want to put my 2 pence in, because it's like, wow, what's going on? Like, but in regards to where Puma sit at the moment, I mean the things that have stood out for me in the past few months is obviously we saw the release with N Clothing. I'm not sure, was that a wait, am I allowed? Anyway, was that an exclusive? I can't remember. Anyway, I've done it now. Anyway, and I don't know whether or not that was to test the waters. I can't. I'm pretty certain they sat. So I mean, obviously that didn't work. But one thing that I'm noticing that. Oh, did it? Yeah. Oh shit! There you go.
Swear jar.
Okay. So well, I mean, one thing that I've noticed, especially when I'm coming through Instagram and stuff, is that there's a lot of do we call it micro influencers? And there's a lot of push on there. I mean, yeah, you don't see it on the billboards and stuff, but I see it through a lot of influential people that I respect on social media, and that's where it catches my attention. But I mean, with regards to where they sit in the market, I mean, I had a conversation with one of these two, and it's like I use the metaphor of Sony, PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo. Like, competing for the 1 and 2, you had the Xbox and PlayStation continuously competing for number 1 spot, miles ahead. But then Nintendo came out and did something that's like, alright, cool, you know what, we're not going to get number 1 and 2. Let's do an alternative where we can sit alongside them. And that's where I personally see Puma at the moment.
I don't know, for me, as someone who makes reviews on shoes, I would love, yeah.
Make sure to subscribe.
I feel like, because I grew up in a different kind of vibe, I grew up with different type of shoes. I was more into like Pumas, Adidas's, and like New Balances. Not saying that, you know, theirs are better, but that's what I'm saying. But I feel like I've experienced, like, I've noticed the difference between, like, I would disagree with what you said about the marketing not being good, because I think it was the opposite. No. I will still criticize Puma, because I remember, I'm a fan of the brand. I remember when they did the Ignite stuff, they started off really well with the training stuff, but then they signed, you know, what's his name? They had that singer, The Weeknd, and then they started making these weird shoes, and they shoved it in your face, they paid all this money, you can see that it was everywhere, but the product itself wasn't good, there wasn't much storytelling, they didn't really go through the technology, even though Ignite itself is a great cushioning, but that's not the point. But I feel like now, from my experience with the RS computer and all that kind of stuff, I didn't even know about the shoe, but then I saw it on Hypebeast, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, these guys are serious. And I like the fact that they actually broke down and they had the displays and they actually talked about the RS computer and all that kind of stuff, which made me be like, wow, this is a part of the history that I was familiar with, but I didn't know that there was a RS0 or there was a RS computer. And do you know what I mean? Do you get what I mean? So I feel like for my performance as well, just uploading Puma reviews, there's a different market. It's just like, for example, I'm into New Balance, and there's a different market than the not mainstream market, but the people, you may not think people are not talking about it, but trust me, Pumas are doing well. Like, you might not think, oh, just because it doesn't sell out, blah blah blah, but they are moving. They're moving.
Like
around.
that's
how I would say I'm 22. Young people, trust me, like 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds are like, what is this shoe? Sam, can you spend this shoe? Like, people are interested. That's how I agree with that. Puma has such a strong history. Like, they have such great inventions throughout history that they don't bring out. That's my frustration with the brand. Like, and I agree that they should really push it next year. Yeah, I'm excited.
Jojo.
I just have one question. It's kind of around the social media strategy to roll out this shoe. Obviously, a lot of people here, they remember this shoe. I don't, because I'm too young. But a lot of people remember this shoe and they feel like the cell kind of resonates with them. How are you going to keep that message so that it's not diluted? Because a lot of the times I see with social media influencers and micro-influencers, they put on a nice fit and that's it, and I know nothing about the design and nothing about the history of the shoe. And sometimes, I'm okay with that. If it looks good, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a nice shoe. But if you've talked about the cell and the technology all night, so how are you going to make sure that story carries through in the way you market it? Right.
So with us, obviously, like I said, there is that story of the heritage and where it has been in the performance and where it is now, and we want to continue that story with certain people such as the Drop Day, people like yourselves, and then we also want to showcase the style story which is going to be led and owned by the younger generation and let them create the next chapter of Cell for us. And we obviously have to have that be brought to life on different channels like Basement Approved, where they contextualise the style and stuff. So it's very much for us to make sure we're aware of the importance of both stories, the past and obviously the present, and moving forward and working out who we feel is going to resonate with the audience who we're trying to reach, and then it's about sustaining it. So we know where we want to go, we know who we want to target, but definitely sustaining it is the key thing. And it only can be sustained if there's an appetite, and the appetite will be there if we choose the right people to maintain it in some respect.
And just from your role, is it kind of, for you, when you said about going forward in the lifestyle and the fashion aspect, is it, I sometimes get frustrated with brands because you see the kind of people they've chosen to partner with and it looks like a numbers game as opposed to something that's really original, and how much of this actually translates to real sales? So in terms of the lifestyle, have you gone for enough, be honest if you have, whatever, it's your money, but is it a numbers game? Is it an authentic thing? See a particular style or something about the individual that says, yeah, actually this is going to be a good fit?
Yeah, I think it's very much going back to the point of where we're in a market, we're well aware that there's two parts to it. There's an authentic part and then there's a numbers part, there's a commercial area, and then there's people who actually dig the past and dig the present because they're actually shoe fans who love shoes and they're not even buying it to wear. So for us, there will be investment in a more commercial approach later down the line and as we progress the sales story, and that's to reach a completely different audience. And then there's more about kind of getting the right people under one roof like we are tonight, which is all about maintaining the story that we know you are interested in, that's the heritage, and making sure that we continue this type of approach as well as the numbers game. So it's kind of getting a quantifying how much you need to invest in both to not outsell yourself as a brand values, but also not kill the shoe before you've even retold the story.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Perfect symmetry with Rory being our last question.
Well, it's not really a question as such, more of a statement, but that's one thing I've always liked about Puma is you've always kind of stayed true to a lot of, say with the Suedes and the Clydes, you've always stayed true to that b-boy and skateboarding kind of culture. Is that something with your ambassadors that you're kind of looking to maintain with the Cell? Are you going back to things like Liv Christie and people like that, and then kind of creating a story where you've got the older representatives and going back and creating a story with a new ambassador who's of a similar ilk, who's going to maintain that oomph with the younger generation?
Yeah, I think it's obviously, it's not always easy enough to get someone who's an ambassador who can just do something for a shoe. I think you have to be careful in terms of who you're picking with. So we started doing a lot of stuff with someone like J2K, who's obviously a pioneer within the training scene, maybe not as well known by the younger generation as it is by the people in this room, but for us it's the moderation of working with people like him, but also understanding the importance of targeting that new wave and who are they watching, who are they listening to. If it's not a musician, is it basement approved, is it etc. etc. So it is understanding how much we invest in both buckets, to be honest, and making sure we do it the right amount at the right time.
That's why I've always liked it, that heritage kind of side. You kind of keep the older roots at the same time as reintroducing it to newer people.
That's our strength.
Young
Our heritage
generation.
is our strength. It's obviously we've got amazing past, we've got amazing history, we've done some great things. We want to continue, but we don't want to forget about that. But we have also got to understand that we are moving forward as well, and we just need to maintain a healthy balance of both.
Yeah.
Adam, you're the final one.
Yeah, sorry, taking it back to the cell aspect, personally coming from like a 3D printing background,
wow.
Is there a way that we're going to see the cell incorporate a 3D aspect, or is that somewhere that
saucy. In terms of free design or in terms of for the consumer space?
I mean, maybe for both really, both the brand and the consumer, so you'd have the cell or whatever technology alongside, say, a 3D aspect to the shoe, be it the upper, the midsole, something like that.
So tomorrow we have another piece of activity which we're aiming to engage with a wider audience at different times, where we're going to break the shoe down into the three parts in terms of lacing construction, technology, etc. There will also be a 3D printing station set up within this space, which will be creating the cell throughout the day, so people can actually see the shoe come into life in a very different setting, but obviously a setting which is very relevant to today. Our designers are using 3D printing for prototypes very much at the early stages for apparent reasons, but there will be a 3D printing of the shoe tomorrow in a space on the same strip. So it's definitely something we want to do. We used 3D printing in a previous story in the RSX as well in terms of extreme reinvention and how we can kind of be relevant to these people who are part of the scene and the way they're going to change it and move forward, by also having a nice gesture of having them involved in the content as well.
That is it. That is your lot. Give yourself a round of applause. So, don't all disappear. There's some more
food.
drinks,
There's
food.
food.
There's some shoes downstairs as well. So, obviously, just head downstairs. Once again, just want to say thank you to Footpatrol and Puma for putting us on. And yeah, this has been a conversation about the cell. Thank you very much.
You have been
blacklisted.
I have been Val Willjams. You have been.
My name is Mill.
He has been.
Ranks 23.
There's food downstairs.
Thank you.